This is the first panel in the afternoon that attempts to kind of examine the practice of design, what's kind of behind the scenes. And we have some wonderful guests here that I'm very, very pleased to join on stage with. I'm going to do some brief introductions, and then I'm going to let these guys speak for themselves and for some of the programs that they are kind of chairing or leading, and we'll have some lively discussion, hopefully. Vivian, immediately next to me, is an award-winning designer and entrepreneur. Currently, she is the chief founder in residence at 30 Weeks. It's Google's founder program for designers. Previously, she was founder and CEO of Snaps and co-founded the design studio Tronic in New York City. Scott Doorley is the creative director of the Stanford D School, where he teaches visual design and communication design. He is the co-author of the book Make Space, and he designs spaces for people looking to bring creativity into their life and their workplace. He is a designer, teacher, mentor, artist, and father, and most importantly, he loves ampersands. Andre joins us from General Assembly, and he has spent the last 6 years designing learning experiences at Apple, Obama for America, and of course, GA. For the past 2 years, he's been working to create the user design experience Immersive, a 10-week full-time program at General Assembly. Enrique Allen is a general partner and co-founder at Designer Fund. Previously, Enrique was a designer at VC firms, including 500 Startups, Facebook Fund, and Venrock. Where at those funds, he helped invest in companies like Wildfire, which was acquired by Google, and Behance, which a lot of you probably know, which was acquired by Adobe. He's also a Stanford alum and is teaching D-Media at the Stanford School of Design, and has been teaching that for the past 5 years. And finally, on the end, Michael is the founding partner and creative director of 2x4 in New York City, a National Design Award-winning firm. He has 3 decades of design education experience, teaching at the Rhode Island School of Design, teaching at Yale School of Art, and is currently the director of the Graphic Architecture Project at Columbia's graduate program for architecture. His new book, Multiple Signatures, was published by Rizzoli last year. And with that, I'm going to advance to some of your slides.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Vivian Rosenthal, founder in residence of 30 Weeks. 30 Weeks is a program aimed at design founders with an education bent, sort of incubator meets education model. It's 30 weeks long, as the name implies. It's in New York City, and to date, it's been fairly under the radars. We've just launched this September. The image behind me is a shot of our space down at 250 Hudson. So this is led by Google, but also has a number of incredible design schools partnered with us, including Hyper Island and Cooper Union, SVA, Parsons, and Pratt. And what we're really looking to do is to help people with a design background become design founders by bringing together design, business, and technology. So it's very much about a collaborative process. And we're really looking to get the word out. And so obviously, this is an audience of designers. So please come find me afterwards or find me on Twitter if you're interested in learning more, because we're hoping to sort of change the way that education happens by giving people a chance to move into what we call like learning through launching, which is really the mantra of the program.
I had asked each panelist to supply a image of their program, as well as a historical or personal image to kind of kickstart the conversation. So this is Vivian's.
Yeah, so when I was asked to give a historical image, I was very influenced by the Bauhaus. I used to be an architect, and it's what I studied. And the Bauhaus, if you translate it literally from German to English, it's a school of building. And so I think today what we're doing with 30 Weeks as part of this new incubator is thinking about a school of building. But of course now what we're building is often intangible and digital, but nonetheless it's building. I think there's been a shift in what building means, but it's very interdisciplinary practice. And so this is something that I studied in school and really excited me to see all these different arts coming together. And for the same reason, I'm excited about sort of where we are collectively today.
Moving on to Scott.
I'm Scott Doorley. I'm the creative director, of the Stanford D school. The D school is a little bit of a misnomer. We're not a school. That would be like the School of Engineering or the School of Education or the Graduate School of Business. And we teach design, but we teach design mostly to non-designers. So we take people who are coming to the university as graduate students mainly, looking at getting a business degree or an education degree or an engineering degree, and then we give them a process to approach problem solving. So we have a lot of people who are starting businesses, and they're starting businesses with a design bent. Or we have people who are creating curriculum, and we help them create a curriculum with a design bent. And for us, that means they're human-centered, they're highly intentional, and they prototype their way to an answer. Within that, though, we do teach a lot of design-oriented classes. I teach a few, one with Enrique, D Media, which is about designing for across platforms. Also another one called Storytelling Visual Communication Studio. That's about thinking about how you communicate. This example I gave, we've been playing around with getting out of the classroom, because what we found was we give projects to students, everything's project-based, so a lot of the learning is actually not happening when we're with them. You know, we're with them for 3 to 4 hours a week, but there are all these gaps where they're actually doing a ton of learning and we're not there. So we thought, how can we get in touch with them? We created this thing we call Minnow, which is sort of just like a homebrew little web app that allows us to send super short videos under a minute to closed groups. And the way we're using it is for student teams to reflect on what they're doing, or to send tips when we know they're about to go into something that might be taxing for them. Like they're about to go into user testing, and we know that, and we can send them something to just give them a little hit. And the thing we found when we started testing it, which was like simultaneously discouraging and exciting, was that a lot of the students came back. We gave them, as our first test, 4 one-minute videos over a weekend when they were going to do some prototyping. And the students came back and said, I learned more in those 4 minutes than I had in 4 weeks of class. Which on the one hand, you're like, that's great. Wow, we taught you in 4 minutes. And on the other hand, you're like, what happened in the rest of class? You know? But as it turns out, I think that's not totally true. I think that was the perception that they had. They felt like they had learned more just because the timing of the content was so good. To be totally honest, I shot the videos and they were kind of crap. They were not great videos. But the timing was something. And so we're really starting to look at when are we giving students content as a big question that we're asking. And then I just want you to like absorb this photo for 1 second. Okay. This is Charles Eames' house, and there are a bunch of nuns sitting on the floor, and there's a noose in the middle of the room. And I was looking for an image like this because I wanted to share somebody who's a hero of mine, who is a nun named Karita Kent, who taught at the College of the Immaculate Heart in LA. She taught art and design there. And she was like one of these visionary people who brought in the community around her to really teach the people, the students that were there, many of whom were studying to be nuns, which is why you have so many nuns in here. I should explain the noose, but I'm going to hold on for a second before I do that. But she had this way of really bringing in people from the community. So she had brought in Charles Eames, she brought in Alfred Hitchcock, she brought in Buckminster Fuller to teach like very small groups of nuns. And it was just kind of amazing that she was able to draw that energy in. And then the second thing is she was like the queen of the assignment. You know, like creating an assignment that really pushes students to explore what they're thinking about and how they're doing their own work. And she used a lot of numbers in her assignments. She would say, like, you know, you have to do 100 of these, or you have to do 50 of these, and then take 20 of those, and do 20 more, and then take 10 of those, and do 10 more of those. And it just reminded me that there's something about being able to be in an educational environment that gives you freedom that you don't have. So the noose is Charles Eames set up a noose in the middle of his room with a stack of boxes so that his kids could, like, fly into the boxes, which I thought takes this kind of frightening object and makes it kind of delightful. So,
Thanks, Scott.
thanks.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Plaut. I'm a product lead at General Assembly working on all of our full-time programs. And the idea behind General Assembly is to really help folks from all sorts of different backgrounds enter the world and kind of transition their career, be it from anywhere from marketing to an architect into the world of web development or UX design or product management. And so for the last 2 years, I've been really building out our 10-week full-time UX design program with a number of amazing designers all around the world. And this picture really shows to something that Scott was talking about, the importance and the emphasis that we put when we designed our program in actual creation and doing. And that something that was really important to us when we were building our program was that our students didn't spend a whole lot of time in the classroom, that there's only so much that you can really learn by listening to someone, and there's only, you'll never really reach this capacity as a designer if you don't actually create and talk to people. So we have a huge emphasis on our students to just get out of the classroom, go into a park, talk to people, watch how they use technology, really try to understand what their needs are, and how they just behave. And that's ultimately how we think you'll become a great designer. And again, our goal is to really sort of spark that interest. So the greatest sort of compliment we've ever gotten from one of our students is that through this program, they were sort of able to find the thing that got them excited to wake up in the morning. And so, yeah, that's the program. In terms of my inspiration, I feel like I went sort of totally to a different place. But the way that I look about building learning experiences is the way that you should be building any type of experience, be it an app or a service or something that I really draw inspiration from and love, which is music and Bonnaroo, which are what these images are. So when we were actually building this UX program, and the way that I've tried to approach things that I've done with the Obama campaign and Apple is to really think through what are the types of experiences that not only help people learn something, but what are the types of experiences that motivate people, that sort of elevate them to become something different or something better? What kind of experience helps people come together sort of in a uniting purpose? And I think those kinds of experiences are all around us. And so this is just one thing that kind of inspires me on a day-to-day basis. So not specific to design education, but just an incredible experience generally.
Cool. Hey, everybody. So excited to see you. There's all these laptops out there. Are you guys Googling stuff right now, or what are you doing? Just checking that you guys are awake. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Enrique Allen. I co-founded Designer Fund with the mission to help designers create businesses with meaningful impact in the world, hopefully in spaces that really need design help from you guys, like in education, health, energy and environment. And one way that we achieve our mission is by investing in designers who are starting new companies. Another way that we do that is through our professional development program, Bridge, which you see pictured here. And Bridge really just connects experienced designers like yourselves with top companies here in the area and our community. And really what we're interested in is helping accelerate the career of really the best designers and exposing them to what it takes to be great individual contributors, great managers, potentially design directors, and maybe even founders one day. So that's what we're really interested in terms of Bridge. And for my inspirational historical design reference, how many of you guys know who this guy is? Crickets, maybe? All right, this is John Dewey, who's a really world-renowned education reformer who's quite prolific in his writing and published a number of books, including Democracy in Education, I believe in 1916. And he was also a huge proponent of hands-on learning, as well as experiential education and learning. And one of the frameworks that Dewey inspired was this really super simple, basic feedback loop, which is activity. So we spend most of our time doing activity, reflection, how we synthesize our experience, and theory, how we conceptualize that into some framework or some abstraction. So there's some basic loop of activity, reflection, theory. And when I started to reflect on the designers that we work with, at Bridge, my own experience, we spend most of our day, let's say at least 50% doing activity, working on our products and services. Maybe we spend the other 40% with our family, our personal time. So that leaves maybe 10% time for continued education. So how should we structure that remaining time? And one of the aha moments I had, inspired by John Dewey and Scott Doorley, is I think that we might not actually make enough time for reflection in our process. and arguably we don't need as much any more theory. We already have a ton of activity. We might be really lacking in the reflection part of that cycle. And so that's something that we've been considering and changing in our curriculum. Thanks.
Okay, I'm Michael Rock, and I represent the rear guard for this committee. I think I have two images that are actually related and formally related and also conceptually related, I think. And this one is from the Yale School of Art, a final critique. And the second one is one from about 1926, also a kind of final critique. I teach simultaneously at Yale in the School of Art and at Columbia in the School of Architecture. And this is interesting overlap between these two different ways of thinking about making in general. But I think that the thing that's common in all kind of design experiences, educational experiences, is that it's a combination of immersion and this close looking, and that being together and looking at things really closely in a very comparative way. And so I love this image from Yale because there's just so much visual material and it's this a complete immersive environment. But if you go to the next one, this is 1926. It's Kazimir Malevich at the Univasan, which was one of the revolutionary schools of design that came after the 1919 revolution. And what I like about this is that, again, it's a kind of immersive environment. It's a group of people, both teachers and students, looking together and looking really closely. But I think what was really interesting about this period, because this school basically came out of the Vahudamos, which is really the precursor to what the Bauhaus became. And this idea of really trying to create a revolution in form as well as a political revolution, and trying to rethink the world new through the aesthetic and trying to create an image of a new world. And what I find especially interesting about that is that when Lenin visited the school, he was getting old at that point, and ultimately declared the work they were doing counter-revolutionary because it was inaccessible, it was elitist kind of work, because it was the work of a kind of an aesthetic elite. And so while they're trying to enact, in one way, aesthetic reform or an aesthetic movement, somehow they become distanced from the political. And I think this kind of connection between the aesthetic and the political is really something we grapple with still. Okay.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for sharing kind of your programs. And I wanted to start our discussion to kind of ask you to share with the audience what your students, or whatever you might call them, actually, I'd love to actually know what you call your students if they're not students. What's the actual nomenclature you use for that? But what is the kind of composition and the makeup of them as they apply or they come to your program? What are you looking for?
Sure. I'll start. So, yeah, we specifically don't call them students at 30 weeks. We call them designers, and that was a very conscious decision for them to think of themselves as, not. We felt like students was a little bit more passive, and we want them to be really taking an active role. And so that was sort of critical in the makeup. But yeah, if you want to just talk about what you're...
I mean, we're at a large university, so they are called students, but we do play a lot with language, and I think it is really important to put them in a posture. And our students are actually not design students most of the time. We have, I'd say, 10% design students, and ours are coming in from all different directions.
Yeah, I mean, we do call our students as well, and we were just talking about this a little bit backstage of this sort of interesting thing where all of our students are adults, right? They're certainly not kids, and most of them have graduated and have masters, and I think it's a really sort of fragile and vulnerable place to be in a learning environment once you've already started your career or you're sort of trying to perfect something. And so I certainly don't think there's anything negative about the term student, but that you acknowledge that we are all sort of students. It's about kind of elevating that term, I think, as opposed to thinking of it more from the lunchbox and desk kind of mentality.
Yeah, likewise for us, we don't call the designers that we work with students. I think I would assume many of you maybe aren't interested in maybe going back to design grad school or something like that. So we're interested in learning from each other as a community, as a network, and sharing those best practices that are rarely shared publicly, but do that in more of a peer-to-peer style.
Yeah, I think it's similar. I taught in Holland for a while at the Jan van Eyck Academy, and there they very decidedly excised the word student from the vocabulary, and everyone was referred to as a participant, which I thought was an interesting approach, but in a way somehow breaks down the idea that there is something to learn, and there's people who are teaching and people who are receiving. And I think that whatever that term is, I think we still believe, at least, that there's something to impart, that there's knowledge to impart, and that that relationship between teacher and student is intact.
Okay, and so what are your students or designers and non-designers, in Scott's case, what are they kind of coming to you for, or what is it that they're trying to participate in and learn from in your programs? Like, what are the kind of core issues that you're kind of seeing in today's context?
Sure. So one of the things that we recognized is that designers are often seen as sort of this work-for-hire person. And so with 30 weeks, we're really trying to break that. And not that there isn't a role for that. Obviously, there is. But in our case, almost everyone who applied, up to date had sort of been paid for their services as a designer. And we were really trying to implement a shift into the role of being a founder. And that doesn't mean you have to start your own company. It might be sort of being a leader inside an existing company and really pioneering change that way. But it was really a shift in mindset and looking for people that sort of had that grit and tenacity and also a real desire to make change in the world rather than just solving for a specific brief and then moving on to the next brief and so on and so forth. So we wanted people to sort of pick their heads up and look at the world around them and say, like, what are the opportunities here for change?
And so they're all pre-existing designers.
Yes, in the case of 30 weeks, people were all designers from product design, architecture, interactive design, graphic design, really runs the gamut.
I'm going to hop around a little bit because I'd like to stop going across the row. This isn't a classroom by any means. Andre, can you speak a little bit about your audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that the folks that come into GA are really at the very beginning of their career. So they aren't designers when they come in. They, again, might come from a world of marketing or engineering or literally pretty much anywhere. And they're coming into our program to transition in their careers. So it's really to enter the world as UX designers. And so really the point of the program is to, A, sort of help them fall in love with this industry and the craft, and give them sort of just enough skill. And the way we look at it is, really, you're going to learn how to do this throughout your life and throughout your career, and that 10 weeks can certainly, it can't replace years and years of experience, but that it's supposed to be this initial spark that allows you to then go on to a lifelong sort of learning experience, and places like 30 weeks and Designer Fund are kind of perfect places for our students to go to once they have had those experiences of working somewhere and developing their skills, which is sort of cool. They can work together in that sense.
It's kind of like minimum viable skills.
Yeah.
To ship. And how about at the D school?
Yeah, I was going to say there's actually, I've mentioned that there are a lot of non-designers, and that's given, I think, me a particularly interesting vantage point on like what design education is doing. And we're trying to give them challenges that push their creative thinking. And we give them these challenges, and they go out and they do them, and immediately, whatever challenge they're working on, the design education gets sucked into that challenge. I'll give an example. So we have like students working on K-12 schools, and what we're thinking, the assignment that we're giving them, is that they're going to go and use design process to figure out how to change, I don't know, whether it be curriculum or the community or the space of the school. And then what happens is the teachers in the school want the design curriculum for themselves. Or they go into a business and they're like looking at how do people work together, how do we redesign a collaboration space at an office, and then the people in the business want the design curriculum. And so I think what I'm seeing is like at this moment right now, design, everybody wants it kind of, and I think it's a growth moment for design, whether it be for non-designers or people who are trying to move into design or people who are long-term designers. There's just this like hunger for it, and I think there's something about the approach of design at this moment that's really useful, both in terms of working and in terms of education, that has to do with being able to engage the world to figure out your problem. which is just a useful thing when the world feels really dynamic, right? Versus thinking about it as, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff, and then I'll know something, and then I'll be able to go out and conquer the world. I'm going to learn how to find the knowledge I need at any given moment. To me, that's what design is about, and then use that knowledge to bring something into reality. So in a sense, like, our students are designers because they want to use a tactic to create something in the world.
So are they designers, or are they using design process?
It's tricky. Like, I go back and forth between that. Like, sometimes I want to say they're not designers, but they do design. Like, they're not a professional, but they do design. And then other times, like, if I call them designers, it makes them feel good and they do better work, so I'll call them designers. You know what I mean? And I think it's valid either way, but it is different than, say, trying to become where your practice is only design. You know, I'm working with people so that I can serve a design function in whatever's happening, versus I'm going to do what I do and I'm going to approach it from a design perspective. They're definitely different, but I like to play with what we call them. You know.
And Michael, how is that affecting the kind of the universities?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that there's these. It's very hard to generalize because there's so many multivalent ways that people decide to go to school. But I think you could, in the most general terms, say that half the students are escaping something and the other half are trying to get into something. So half are basically in a career and they're not necessarily happy with where it is or what they're doing, and so they use school as a lever to escape from that situation. And so it allows them to reinvent themselves in a way and rethink themselves in some kind of new form. And I think the other half are basically trying to enhance what they have and professionalize in a way that they couldn't do professionally in the industry. So some people, I think, are really trying to have this life-changing experience, and that's probably a little bit different when you go to a 2-year graduate program where you're getting yourself out of your life and then starting something else rather than doing some kind of professional development. But I do think that there's this aspect which is to deprofessionalize is a really big desire for a lot of students I see. Yeah.
And do you guys, how would you kind of define where we're headed? It sounds like you all kind of educate people on design processes and design thinking, and if you call it a designer or you call it something else, that's up for debate. But where are we going, and how should we kind of continue this growth? Like, does it kind of need this full spectrum? Do you anticipate everyone kind of creating programs that service all the different phases of your arc as a designer, or is it that you know, where should we go next?
I mean, I think to something that Scott said that I completely agree with is that there's a sort of moment that we're in right now with design where it's a lot more people are becoming aware of it, and a lot more people are understanding how it can improve things, regardless if it's healthcare or politics or how you get a cab. And I think what's interesting about design education is that, first of all, everyone in this room, you guys have a set of skills and methods and practices that don't just solve the problem that you're sort of immediately working on, they solve almost every problem. And so I think the way that we talk about design and the way that we sort of individually approach it and how we mentor people in our organization and how we sort of bring it to our everyday lives is sort of where I think it needs to go. In terms of design education as a more formal kind of idea, I think it is about bringing the process and design thinking and these practices to other areas and seeing where it can be impactful.
Yeah, I think that the future of design education will require a lot more collaboration and a lot more coordination amongst organizations and institutions. So schools, and 30 Weeks is a great example of that, partnering with a number of universities in New York. I think we can do a lot better in terms of industry informing curriculum at our top schools here at TCA, at Berkeley, at Stanford, et cetera. And then once someone actually leaves the institution, then what? Whether it's GA or whether it's online courses or whether it's continued education, professional development at that company. So I think it's going to take coordination and collaboration across multiple phases of a designer's life cycle. And I think one thing that we really don't understand well, at least in our research, is what really sets apart a top designer from a junior designer. What really sets apart senior versus junior, and what are these nuances that are missing in the curriculum?
Yeah, I want to know a little more about any of your thoughts on what makes a great designer, and how many great designers are your programs, shipping essentially, right? Are we just making designers that are mediocre, or is this the formula for making badass designers?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know at 30 weeks we're sort of shifting the definition of even what a designer is a little bit from, away from aesthetics and more towards sort of human-centered, problem solving, right? And thinking about how do you create value in the world. And, in our view, a designer is someone hopefully who has empathy and can see, a problem and the solution from many different perspectives and can try to help solve for that rather than just look at things, through an aesthetic lens. Not that that's not important, but so we're taking a bit more of a holistic view of what a designer is or what we'd like a designer to include. Do we think that,
I guess I'm trying to get at, I mean, are those designers then, I mean, your program's focuses are on various aspects, but I'm wondering, are we neglecting the other skills? Do we think that, our designers are being less good at color theory and they're kind of sucking at typography even more? And, what should a modern designer kind of be in?
Well, maybe it is that designs become such a complex kind of practice that you can't really say there's one core skill that you have to have. So in a way, all of these programs represent the fact that you need lots of different kinds of education for lots of different kinds of things. And one of the things I always think about is that the people in class now are basically finishing their career in 2060. So what do they need in 2060? We have no idea yet. So we presume they're going to need new skills as they go along. But on the other hand, you like to believe that there's certain things that you learn in school that you carry with you your whole life, right? That are part of you and that you keep going back to. There's a well there that you can keep going back to and it doesn't run dry. So I think that there has to be some combination of some core things and some things which get added on in the future. And I think that that's what all these programs are doing. I think they're kind of creating these prosthetic devices to help us through or something. So.
It's kind of like design your own design education approach.
I mean, I also think what Michael's getting to is like there are different facets of it. I do think it's like expanding so much that like the definition of a designer is totally changing, and people who are calling themselves designers now like may not have felt comfortable calling themselves designers 20 years ago. And that's great because it means that more people are trying to be responding to human needs, and it means that more people care about how something communicates through form. It means that more people are being experimental in the way they develop things. So it's great. It's killer. And then at the same time, like I think design as a practice, a professional practice, is getting more and more nuanced. Like it's just deepening and deepening and deepening, and it really needs to. And there need to be people who are like going down to the depths. But they don't necessarily have to be the same people, and we're going to call them the same thing. We're going to call them a designer maybe for a while, but maybe they're really different things, and that's okay too. But I think as the word kind of brings with it, in fact, I was totally stalking Michael's site this morning, and he's got these 3-word design manifestos on there that are just amazing. They're great. I don't know anything about the project, but they're really cool because they're all really different, and yet they're all design. Like they're all design. You read them and you're like, yep, that's what design is, but none of them are the same. They're fundamentally different, and I think that's okay,
And I think maybe it relates to what Enrique was saying too about collaboration, because I think that probably increasingly we're going to have to cobble together these skills to do things where everyone doesn't have to be a great colorist, for instance, and but that you need to know a great colorist at some point. So to solve something or to do something. So the problems are probably big enough and complex enough to where collaborative teams of lots of different skills come together, and that's where again you can educate people in lots of different ways. So.
We definitely think about how we can just learn from the best people in the business. So bring together awesome designers at Dropbox, at Pinterest, at various companies to break down our creative process, look at the tools that we're using, the iteration cycles, what data we're getting back. So I think the more that we share that information as a community, we can kind of raise the bar and continue to keep that bar high. So we think a lot about, again, that peer-to-peer and role models that we can learn from each other.
Yeah, I think just one thing I'd add on in terms of collaboration, if we look at the sort of tech startup scene, the typical founders tend to be engineers or someone with an MBA or business background. And so, one of the other things we were looking at 30 weeks is like, how do we elevate designers to think of themselves as, that triumvirate of like they're the third and missing link. And if you bring together those three types of people, you have a really strong base. And so that was something that we're really keen on too, is collaboration and making sure designers are part of that, part of that practice.
That's such a powerful, like, it's crazy to think that there's so many things in the world that we use and are so integral to our lives that haven't been designed or have been designed by like default.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the work of 30 weeks and just so much of what we're all doing is about putting designers into that conversation and at least introducing more people who can ask the right questions and go through the right process regardless of where they are. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up, but I'd like each of you to kind of tell me where you hope your program will be in the future. I know that, Michael, you brought up that it's a hard thing to speculate on, but where do you aspire towards?
I mean, I can throw it out there. I kind of began with the thing talking about sort of leaking out of the classroom a little bit. And I think we did a project recently called Stanford 2025, which was funded by the School of Engineering to look at what's the on-campus experience for students in the year 2025 in the age of like online education. I mean, this is Google, like YouTube is probably one of the best learning platforms in the world, right? For real. And that's happening, and that's just one example. So how do we kind of let people come into a safe place where they can like misunderstand things and explore, but then give them something when they get beyond it that keeps them connected and keeps what Enrique was talking about, like keeps them reflecting on what they're doing and not just getting into the grind and like delivering, but what did I just do? How did I deliver that so well and that not so well? And that ability to reflect and stay connected to a learning community whose agenda is learning and expanding and growing, I think would be something I'd like to see.
Yeah, I think for our program at GA, it's about a couple of things. The first, I would say, is just trying to open up access to more and more people. And this is something we're consciously always trying to do is how do we make it more accessible, especially to folks that are just completely underrepresented in this field. So we have this thing called Opportunity Fund, where we essentially just massively reduce the cost of the program. And that's a huge goal for us. And the other one, because we're so at the like bottom of that funnel in terms of, or rather top of the funnel, where we're getting a lot of folks who haven't heard about design and who might be interested in becoming a designer, kind of evangelizing the field as a whole and going out to people who maybe are really into product and maybe who have opinions on it, but they don't understand what it took to create something, or they just have no idea how to go about making something of their own. So really evangelizing design as an industry and as a practice and as a mindset, and helping people come into it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple for us. If, in 10 years, fast forward 10 years from now, if we look back, how we played a role in helping start great companies like Airbnb, et cetera. If we look back at all the designers that have participated in Bridge, are they amazing individual contributors, managers, directors, even founders? And then I think the bonus for us is if we can look back and say that we've contributed to some of this fundamental infrastructure that I think is needed for designers to continue to succeed through tech.
But I think for us, we have this interesting condition where only about 30% of people who study architecture practice it. And so I would say that, in a way, I would hope that we'd even get to a smaller percentage of that, because I think that the study of architecture as a kind of intellectual activity is an incredible foundation for doing lots of different kinds of things. And making buildings or making cities is only one sliver of those things. And I think that increasingly we see the school as a school of architectural thinking and a way of thinking about the diagram or thinking about design that has multiple applications. And I think that in the future maybe we have 10% who are actually building buildings. So.
Yeah, I think, and then just to sort of follow on that, for us, it's sort of taking that kind of thinking and curiosity and passion and then bringing that into creating a product or a business or a service and sort of fueling that. And so, we would obviously hope that some of the designers go on to start companies or become great leaders at other companies. And we're also looking to scale the program either with other geographies or larger class sizes. So a lot of the same goals.
Well, thank you guys for sharing some of your thoughts and where modern design is, design education. And I think we've burned through a lot of our Q&A time, so I'm going to release us at that. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.